because nothing costs $1 anymore. Because nothing costs $1 anymore. So you 2 pennies each time you go up $1. Louise, okay, you do the fucking math in your head. Okay, so um, today is Good Friday, and yesterday uh, I was in excruciating pain, and it was because early in the morning, um, I I was doing these trap exercises, like anyway, they're these I can't remember what they're called, but anyway, as I was putting one weight down, like of course the balance in my lower back was off, and like I'm pretty fat now, so there's a lot of compression on my lower spine, and I've had lower spine issues before, and so it almost slipped. My disc almost. Anyway, so I was telling it to my friend, and my friend was like, "You know what that is?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's my lower lumbar. It's like L3 or something." And she was like, "No, that's your grandma, my dead grandma." She was like, "That's your grandma," and I'm like, "What does my grandma have to do with it?" She's like, "You were cussing on Holy Thursday, and she would have licked your ear." And I was like, "No kidding. That is grandma." So it is Good Friday, as you can imagine. It would be worse. So I'm going to try to not cuss tonight so as not to break any of my bones or for my grandma to come down and break my bones. I just want you to know, like, it's going to be an effort. It's a cognizant effort that I'm making, and I'm not trying to be fake. I'm actually trying to be as real can be, because my grandma was pretty straight up about that whole good, like, I'm not even supposed to be doing this, but I figure because this is about truth and justice and, all that good stuff, uh, grandma would appreciate it. So this show is dedicated to my grandparents, whom I love and miss very much. Did anyone say something stupid like Happy Good Friday today? Well, 2,000 years ago, um, around 3 p.m., well, this is not exact or anything, but like according to the Bible, right? Around 3 p.m. or at 3 p.m., after his crucifixion, the Lord died for our sins, and in 3 days, he will rise from the dead. Um, and that does not stop us, and actually, it should propel us in our search for justice and the truth, because those are just other names for God. Justice, truth, wisdom, light are all names for the Lord. And so I think he would appreciate that as he died for our sins, that we pursue exactly what it is that he tells us to pursue. And part of that's the truth. Now, of course, like the Lord will probably not use so much hyperbole. He likely would not make fun of people like we do here at Kandit. Um, but as he has said, we are not perfect. And we will sin. I am a sinner, okay? And he forgives me. So we are 38 days brining. 38 days, 38 nights since a guy named Jim Herbert, past chairman of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, was very drunk. Was Christine Calvo drunk? That's not a curse word, Christine Calvo. Was Christine Calvo drunk and ran his car into the Aconta Mall, reversed really fast, hit a bus stop that had a person in it. That guy was injured and had to go to the hospital. The PDN did nothing about it. They didn't run anything, nothing. And we should all question how unethical that is, considering that the reason they didn't run anything about it is because Jim Herbert is Rendrati Celis Santiago's good friend, and that's the only reason she didn't run anything about that story. Still hasn't run in 38 days since that event took place. The same way, for years, she didn't run any stories about how her editor at the time was peddling drugs out of the PDN newsroom and out of the home of the federal public defender, which is ludicrous. And if that were any of us at anyone else's home or anyone else's work site, it would have been in the front page of the PDN. Guarantee. Guarantee, Brown. Guarantee. So We're gonna start with. Well, before we start with our first topic, I want to say something about June Paris because we've talked about this before, and I can't find the. For some reason, I don't. I think I just didn't save the video after I went live. But June Paris is this super toxic employee over at Guam Memorial Hospital, and she acts all nice and charming. She's very, very, very kind to your face, but she says these things, that like all she's doing is really poking fun at you. I don't know. I'm not really sure why she's such a bitter old lady, um, but her entire time at the hospital has been spent creating. Yes, my desk is so clean. Creating so many divisions among hospital employees. And I don't know if this is the reason, but Saint Lillian Posadas, the administrator of the Guam Memorial Hospital, or her staff or her management team or whoever, saw fit to move June's happy butt from the GMH main facility over to, it's reported that she's now over at the skilled nursing unit. The reason I brought this up wasn't necessarily to tell that story, but to tell this story, because this is a really funny story. So, I don't know if you know June Paris, you can Google her or whatever, and you can see who she is. But many people do know June Paris because she is a rhymes with bitch. She, for the longest time, do you guys know a guy named Chris Rapola? He's he's actually married. He's married to my cousin Nora. And I swear to God, I swear to God, as Jesus has died for our sins today, I thought, for all these years, I thought that he was June's son. And I just thought it was one of those Chamorro things, Like, maybe he's the product of her first marriage. That's why they have different last names. And I told that to a friend recently, and he was like, "You're gonna burn in hell, Troy." And I was like, "Why?" I didn't say anything mean. He goes, "What makes you think that's June's son?" I said, "Look, they look exactly the same." It was so bad, and I didn't know until my friend told me that they're not related whatsoever. So I told him, oh, well, hello there. So I told him, before I knew that wasn't the son, I, I saw June. It was at the governor's office, I think, or maybe it was at Civil Defense, and I was like, this was when my cousin Nora, I guess, announced that she was getting married to Chris. So I said, "June, congratulations on your son's engagement." It was almost as bad as telling a not pregnant but fat woman, "Congratulations on the baby." But June, even though you're a rhymes with witch, I swear to God, I didn't know. I was just stereotyping. And I made that assumption. Oh my goodness. Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins. Oh shoot. Look, if you don't know who they are, go ahead, look them up. And you know what? I won't think that you're going to burn in hell if you start laughing because. So, anyway, let's move on to our first subject. So, Kandit, I was discussing this earlier today. We have a big problem with the lack of transparency in the new administration, and much of it had to do with their silence or their refusal to provide financial information so that we may report to you something or another about tax refunds. I don't know why they didn't just come out with, um, some sort of statement about why tax refunds have been so late. And truthfully, like Eddie Calvo never never made people wait this long for their tax refunds. And for me to admit something like that, that's a big deal. So that means the Young Girl administration. Uh, I mean, I think people are getting more and more upset about this whole tax refunds thing. And I think people are starting to draw comparisons between you and your predecessor. And if they're comparing you against your predecessor in a bad way, then something's wrong because your predecessor was corrupt and, and conducted himself criminally. So, like, try not to have people draw those comparisons. Why don't you just be transparent about things and let people know so they have better expectations of when their tax refunds come out? But we found the March 2019, the end of March 2019 income tax refund report from the Director of Revenue and Taxation that shows that as of the end of March, 12,000 some tax returns had been filed. Of those, 97 tax returns were for people who would pay or would pay nothing at all and not be owed a refund. The rest of them are for people who are owed a refund. Of those 12,000 some who are owed a refund, 1,435 as of the end of March of those returns for refunds had been processed but not paid, and the balance of it's I don't know, like a lot, 11,000 something have not yet been processed. And that's for 2018 refunds. Now there's a whole bunch of 2017 and prior year, all the way back to going to 2005 refunds that have been processed and have not yet been paid out, amounting to a total of, including tax year 18, processed, not paid out yet, some 7,000 plus tax refunds that need to be paid. It's true that the administration received a windfall of cash on April 15. Now, how much in refunds they're going to pay out, I don't know. But it's coming up. If people filed for those 2017 and prior refunds back in December, then the 6-month period is coming up, like in a couple of weeks, actually. So the short story is I can't tell you when your 2018 tax refunds are going to be paid. According to Goody Rosario, Goody Rosario, who is the financial manager over at the Department of Administration, he said he anticipated that the Department of Administration would begin making tax refund payments for tax year 18 filings no later than the end of April. That's a couple weeks from now, so we'll see. Now, tax refunds isn't the only area where there has been an issue with transparency. There also is, one second, let me bring it up. So on April 10, Johnny Rosario from Kandit News wrote to Tom Added, the executive manager of the airport. Hoffaday, Mr. Added, this request is made pursuant to the authority granted by subsection 10103 of Chapter 10 of Division 1 of Title 5, Bomb Code annotated, the Freedom of Information Act. I hereby request electronic copies of the following documents. Copies of all personnel action documents processed by the AB Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam, from September 1, 2018 to present. Furthermore, as is allowed for under 5 GCA Chapter 10, subsection 10104, I would like to have the documents sent to me via electronic mail. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to your timely response. Lastly, please acknowledge receipt of this request. See Zuos Maasi, Johnny Rosario, Kandit News. Very simple request for public information. Tom Atta, stellar genius that he is, rode back to Johnny on April 16. Half a day. Chelo, why don't we go to my screen so people can see this? This is his response. He says they're in receipt of the letter. The documents that she seeks are being withheld as exempted from disclosure pursuant to 5 GCA, which exempts records pertaining to personnel, medical, or similar files of disclosure, which would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. That is only part of what that law says. Now, there are other parts of that law that define what an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy is. Like, they cannot reveal a person's social security number or a person's personal address, residential or mailing address. It's stuff like that. But for them to withhold these personnel files in their totality is ludicrous, and it's against the law, and it makes Tom Atta liable for $1,000 in fines that Johnny Rosario can receive from Tom Atta in his personal capacity as an idiot, and it also subjects him to the possibility of a criminal misdemeanor charge for violating the Freedom of Information Act. Kandit News isn't the only media station that is having some trouble with government transparency. We can go back from the screen. So is the Pacific Island Times, which is run by an award-winning journalist named Marvik Kagarangan, who covered the fall of the Marcos regime that during the People Power Revolution was under constant death threat before the Marcos government fell, and even had attempts at her life made during the Marcos regime. She came to Guam and she brought her journalism career here. Now she runs the Pacific Island Times, and her correspondent in Yap is the Council of Elders in Yap is asking the FSM Congress to consider that correspondent as persona non grata and to kick her out of Yap State. Just because they have a problem with how she's reporting what the Council of Elders and the FSM Congress is doing with money that's being provided by the U.S. government for the betterment of the people of the Federated States of Micronesia, which includes, actually I probably shouldn't say what it includes because I don't remember all the names and I don't want to piss off anybody. So it definitely includes Yap. Yap State is a member of the Federated States of Micronesia, and so is Chuk State. Now, the Pacific Island Times, because they are an investigative body, much like what we tried here at Kandit needs to be an investigative body, and our focus lately has been on crime stories and on corruption. But Pacific Island Times has managed to expand its coverage to the outer islands, and that they are running into this resistance in the FSM is something that bothers us here at Kandit, because even though they're a competitor, we belong to the same brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, of journalism, and a constant search for the truth for the betterment of society. So we stand with the Pacific Island Times in its protest of what the Council of Elders wants to do. We hope the FSM Congress sees right through it and denies the Council of Elders' request. And likewise, we hope that other media organizations see what is happening with the lack of transparency in the Leon Guerrero administration, and I hope everyone speaks up about it, because it shows, it's beginning to show that there are markers of corruption within the Leon Guerrero administration, people who want to hide things because something else is going on. That's the only reason that transparency would be lacking, especially when the financial and employee information. Now, why Tom Atta doesn't want to disclose personnel records makes us wonder, what in the world are they hiding over at the airport? We'll move on to our next subject, which is the minimum wage. Hold on, before I move on to that subject, a friend wrote, this is regarding the June Paris issue. OMG, you're so dumb. I'm sorry, I know you're live, and I don't like to message you while live, but fuck, I'm dying. I didn't say fuck, Grandma. That was my friend. I'm just reporting it. She says, "F-U-K." I showed someone his picture, talking about Chris Rapola, and he asked if June Paris cut her hair. June, June, if you're watching this, just know that you deserve this. So, um, moving on to our next subject, we had an opportunity to interview Appropriations Chairman Senator Joseph Augustine yesterday. We were supposed to play this yesterday, but I threw my back out. We couldn't do the whole thing. So we prepared um, major portions of the interview that we had with him. He is prepared to introduce legislation to increase the minimum wage from its current $8.25 an hour to $9.25 an hour, which would be a significant boost. It would affect thousands of people who currently make the minimum wage and all those who make between 8.25 and 9.24 an hour. Um, uh, just to provide some foundation to this, the economy on Guam, according to reports by Moody's, one of the ratings agencies, one of the big ratings agencies in the world, um, has been growing at a hyper growth rate, like the 6% or more, from year to year since the year 2011. Where has that economic growth gone? According to Senator Snogestein, it's not going to help the poor of this island. So let's watch what he had to say about the minimum wage.
And then at the same token, everywhere around the island, prices are going up. And the only folks that are actually feeling it are the folks at the minimum wage rate. And that's every waiter, every busboy, every pretty much almost everybody that actually makes a difference on Guam. And as everybody wants to keep complaining, we're not talking about GovGuam employees. GovGuam employees are going to get their increments. I mean, I'm in favor of restoring it, but on the basis that it's a management's tool. It's not a freebie. So with that, and then when you look at everybody else, what management tool does the industry have other than I control your paycheck? Well, then the government needs to get involved and says, no, we will control what the minimum wage would be. And if you remember back in 2015, Speaker BJ wanted to increase the minimum wage. He paused at 8.25. We have studies from the Department of Bureau of Statistics that said that it didn't impact the community, the businesses. And then if we look at it today, the Trump Act, Tax Act, reduced all corporations here on their taxes by 14%. And the main thrust there was that there was hope that they would invest in their business and their employees. There was only one industry that did that, and that was Bank of Hawaii. Got to give them credit. I don't know if any other banks have done that here in Guam, but if we look across the board, if the businesses are paying more than minimum of 9.25, it should impact them. If they're going to make the excuse that, well, the minimum wage now is going to be 9.25, I have to pay someone who's making 9.30 more. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But at least the rule would be 9.25 would be the bottom line. And there's just too many people out here suffering. GWA is already proposing a rate increase. And not only is it improve the water, the providing the service, but they also mentioned salaries. I'm not against GovGuam people getting their salary increase. But when more than 50% of the people of Guam that contribute to the taxes on Guam don't even have a decent minimum wage of up to 9.25, I have to start to think now. Wait a minute, I didn't run for office to be the nice political guy. I ran for office and hopefully be able to shed some light on what should be fair and what's equal to everybody. And if you tell me that today corporate taxes are as an increase, why is it? Is there more businesses? It shouldn't hurt. If there's more business, fine, but they still got to break. And if they have employees, they should be able to pay them. But and some folks have told me, says, you're going to hurt the small business. Really, am I going to help? Am I going to hurt the small business? If you own a canteen, really, how many people do you hire? Your sister, your brother? Really, that's what it is. And most of them are getting paid by salary because it's a family business. If it's a mom and pop store, we can go to most of the mom and pop stores. Who do you find there? Son, daughter, auntie, uncle, niece, nephew. They're getting paid salary. So the minimum wage doesn't impact them. Remember, minimum wage applies to if you're getting paid by the hour. If you pay them by salary, the question would be for that employee, do I want to work for you and you're going to pay me less than what I should get? And then the business will have to get smarter. And at the same token, at the end of the day, there'll be more taxes collected anyway. Because as you get paid more on your minimum wage, you're going to have the ability to go out there and spend more, buy more for your family. And then turn around, the money comes in taxes, and then comes back to service the people want.
So we asked Senator St. Augustine whether he would consider a higher minimum wage, something around like $10 an hour, 10.50 an hour, something like that. And he said that it's something that he's open to, but he wanted to start the conversation at 9:25, understanding that the Chamber of Commerce was going to get its panties in a bunch, and the Chamber of Commerce always gets its panties in a bunch when it comes to the minimum wage. Why? Well, they'll tell you it's because the economy can't handle it, but as Senator St. Augustine just plainly explained to you, it's not that the economy can't handle it, it's that these chamber people don't want to handle that and don't want their profits being eaten into. Can they afford to do it? Well, chamber folks probably can because their corporate income tax rate was slashed by 14% through the Trump tax cuts. Add that to the fact that this economy has been growing and people's wages haven't been feeling that economic growth, and you'd understand that the economic growth has been happening in the top 1% of this island. It is the owners of these big corporations or even these medium-sized corporations who have been benefiting the most from this economic growth, and it has not been trickling down to people, to the majority of workers, and the quality of life continues to deteriorate as prices for everything goes up, including the price of electricity, the price of water, not to mention the store prices on the shelves. And speaking of that, we also got an opportunity to speak with him about the monopoly that Matson Navigation is seeking to create, and not through any market competition, but through an action in the District Court of Washington, D.C. We're going to bring you that interview with Senator St. Augustine, who is the first person who has spoken up publicly about this. As we understand it, Congressman Mike St. Nicholas also is following this issue very closely, which would be a significant departure from his predecessor, Congresswoman Madeline Berdallo, who took thousands of dollars in contributions from Matson Navigation over the course of her campaigns for Congress, and did not stand up for the people of Guam once when it came to its monopoly, its hold over the shipping industry here on this island, and did not say anything when she had the opportunity to say something about Matson's filing in federal court in order to move out APL as its competitor, which would have a significant effect on the prices of everything here on this island. It's something that Senator St. Augustine commented on, had no problem commenting on, and we'll bring that to you tomorrow. So before we get to the main subject of tonight's live cast, which is a whole lot of clues into the criminal pathology of Paul Mophanus and the very high likelihood that there are several other victims, and in this case, some of them may not be survivors. When we come back from our break, we'll start that discussion. So I want to I want to share with you some of the comments first that came in regarding our story on Ariane Nepomuceno, who was Paul Moffness's last known survivor prior to his. Well, she's the reason that he got arrested back in 1995 and was put away in prison. She called his butt out in a lineup, and I want to show you some of the comments. Can we go to my screen? So this is the story that we did. It's on Kandit's Facebook page. It's called "A Warrior Story." That's the title of it. The subhead is "This Is Still My Fight," and it's Ariane Nepomuceno's story and message to the 10-year-old girl who was raped last week Thursday, and to predators out there. And I want to point out a couple of comments here. Well, Adele Rose says, I'm a survivor of this when I lived on Guam. Please read my ebook available on Amazon.com called Catching Dragonflies, Healing from Trauma. It's a memoir, and I discuss what happened to me and how I was able to heal from my experiences. I applaud you for your strength and courage, Ariane Nepomuceno. There was a reply from Marilis Beneventi who says, Adele Rose, I will get your book. What this article is exposing, as you two reveal your victimization, is how widespread and long-standing this scourge is in our community. God bless you, Ariane Nepomuceno, and others who may be still struggling to find people who will believe, fight, and protect you. Vicky Nepomuceno Carrera, who is the aunt of Ariane Nepomuceno, says, it was a courageous act for you, Ariane, to come out in the open. I am so proud of you. Victims like you should be applauded for being brave enough to speak up and tell the world it is not the victim's fault. Hopefully, other victims also will have the strength to do the same, to come out and be an advocate against this kind of crime. God be with you. Here was an interesting one. This is Maria Miller. She is the proprietor of Horizon Properties. It's a real estate company. She's a realtor. She says, any mother knows exactly what Michelle Hope Taitano is saying. Michelle Hope Taitano is the chairwoman of the Guam Parole Board, who made the decision back in 2014 to parole Paul Moffness, and in an interview with Kandit on Monday, blamed the 10-year-old girl for walking at 6:30 in the morning as the reason that she was abducted and raped. She says, do not let young girls walk by themselves, especially during hours that there is no other people around. No one is blaming a child for something like this. Parents have to be cognizant that things like this can happen. This had 17 replies. Nicole Carrera, who I believe is related to Ariane Nepomuceno, she says, I think the point that Kandit is trying to make is that this man shouldn't be walking freely while we as parents and as women have to look over our shoulder for rapists. No matter how closely parents watch their children, a rapist was freed despite being convicted of 4 different rapes that the police know of. Blaming the parent is the same as blaming the victim. It's not their fault. If it didn't happen to her, it would have happened to another girl, and it probably already has. Guam Light wrote, Maria Miller, so you condone their decision to release him. A serial pedophile rapist has more rights than a child and their parents. Most of the public school students ride buses and their parents are at work before their children even go to school. Please feel free to go out at this time and see how many students are at bus stops. The problem isn't that the child was walking to the bus. The problem is that this is a known predator that was released by Michelle Taitano and her goons, even with the knowledge of his previous 4 victims, 6 now that reports are being made public. I'm sure if the parents were aware that a serial rapist was released early, they would be more hyper vigilant. But should they have to be? The issue is they were deficient in their due diligence in preventing this crime and complicit in this crime against a 10-year-old. Michelle Taitano had one job. And then I told Maria Miller to fuck off. And then Guam Light said, you all need to come out of your ivory towers and get off high horses, find out how us regular citizens live. And she posted a picture of Maria Miller with Michelle Taitano at some party. Maria Miller responds, Nicole, I agree with you, and I am not blaming the parents. I am just saying we as parents these days have to be extra vigilant and careful with our children because I am sure this man is not the only predator out there. Hopefully, the valor of this child will strengthen other children to come forward and advocate, as Vicky says, and we can bring more of these crimes to light and punish the perpetrators. Can I just say that I really hate it when people try to cover up their bull cockery with nice words like this, like, oh, I wasn't really trying to say that. I'm just going to be fake right now and be pretentious and tell you something else and pull the wool over your eyes because I believe that I'm smarter than you and I can do that. I mean, come on. It's really hard for me not to cuss right now. I'm just letting you know that I'm having problems not cussing because I'm getting very angry about what this idiot, Maria Miller, is saying in this thing. And she happens to be Michelle Titano's good friend. Ariane Nepomuceno, the survivor in this story, she sees this and she writes, any mother knows exactly how it feels why we have to keep him inside prison. I am a friend, sister, and now a mother that only cares of my friend, family, and child's well-being. Please stop supporting Michelle's decision why she released Mofness and why she blames the victim. It is not her fault. It is not my fault, and it is not my parents' fault. People like Michelle Titano and you are why victims of crimes refuse to come out, and that needs to stop now. Bernadette Stern-Meno wrote, Maria Miller, do not defend Michelle Titano, and let's say her name, shall we, so everyone knows who she is. Michelle Hope Titano. Statements blaming the victim, and do not pretend to speak for me as a mother. As a mother, is Michelle a mother? I don't think so. I can't even begin to comprehend what she is saying since she is blaming the victim. The question to your best friend, Michelle Hope Titano, was, do you regret your decision to parole this monster? That was my question to Michelle Titano. And her answer was to question why someone allowed a 10-year-old to walk to the bus stop in the morning. I understand that Michelle Hope Titano is your best friend, but please don't insult us and don't ever pretend to speak for all mothers when trying to defend her. I mean, let's just say, hypothetically, of course, that Michelle Hope Titano was having an affair with an inmate while serving as parole board chair. Would you defend those actions too? Your comments are disgusting, Maria Miller. Shame on you. And the comments go on and on. I mean, people are upset about this. The people are pissed. And then there's a comment from Michael and Monique Baza. This is Monique Baza, the person who was kidnapped in front of Crown Bakery and she was assaulted. She is a survivor of this very thing. She says, God bless you, Ariane, to share your story and your fight against a system that is so perpetrator-friendly, is courageous and a true testament of strength and bravery. Yours will be the voice for many who live in silence. It will be the fire that ignites a much-needed discussion in the community. I stand with you. And then she goes on. In the 90s, this monster admitted to police that he took more victims than the 4 they know of. The likelihood of him having more victims who probably remain silent due to fear and intimidation than just the 10-year-old child that we know of is a real possibility. Bernadette Stern-Meno says, Michelle, or Monique Baza, it certainly is. Monique Baza writes back, Bernadette, our island is in a state of crisis and chaos, and the scary thing is that if public safety was actually a priority for the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, as many politicians claim it is, then why aren't we hearing about more legislation about stricter laws? Why aren't we hearing anything about improving processes and procedures for victims? Why aren't we hearing more from DOC and other enforcement agencies about much needed resources and services that offer hope for decreased perpetrator recidivism? The chaos and crisis continues because our laws are weak, they hold no real consequence, and are very perpetrator friendly. Now, as a matter of fact, so let's stay on the screen, Chella. We'll stay on my screen. I want to show people something. Last year, this is before, all this hype, right? Last year, Senator Therese Terlahi, I think last year she was Vice Speaker Therese Terlahi, she introduced a Bill 93. It was actually signed into law. And this was an act to amend blah, 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 relative to improving the Guam parole board processes. And before we go into what this law does, days or weeks before um, the abduction and rape last week, Senator Terlahi um, had been on a mission an inquiry into the Guam Parole Board, asking them about um, how they made their decisions on certain things, and that included the Paul Moffness release. So Senator Terlahi was on top of this matter even before, so she wasn't reacting. It's something that I think is really important for everybody to know that in this instance, at the very least, there was one elected official on this island who was looking out for this subject and for this issue before bad things could happen, and actually did do something to strengthen the laws last year. Um, but would that have been enough? She wasn't a senator back in 2014, so maybe if she was a senator in 2014, things might be different. Maybe the processes would have been changed, and Michelle Titano wouldn't have been able to parole Paul Moffness. But according to this law that Senator Terlahi wrote, she says the legislature finds that the number of persons applying for parole has increased significantly in the past several years. The board has been inundated with parole requests. Parole requests made by the same person annually are rejected every year due to the circumstances of the crimes. Parole board requests and hearings are traumatic for the victims of violent crimes and the loved ones of the victims of violent crimes, and re-victimize them. Serial parole requests by violent offenders require the victims and loved ones of victims to appear at parole hearings every year to oppose or object to the parole requests. The legislature finds that the serial annual parole requests require the victims of violent crimes and their loved ones to relive the pain and trauma of the victims' deaths or injuries, and to experience the loss and grief over losing their loved ones every year, year after year. Many of the victims and their loved ones travel long distances to attend the parole hearings, and the stress of travel is added on top of the already difficult circumstances. Let's stop right there. One of the things that we found about this Paul Moffness case is that most of the survivors don't live here anymore. They left after this thing happened to them. And when the parole board was, when the parole office was trying to locate the survivors or the victims, they couldn't locate any of them except for Ariane Nepomuceno and her family. And it was why Ariane Nepomuceno wrote to the parole board, because she did not travel. She didn't come back to Guam, but her family showed up in her stead, read her statement, and each of them gave their own statement opposing Paul Moffness' release back in 2014, and again in 2018 opposing his early release from parole. And it's an interesting thing that's happened, and it's something that makes sense when these things happen to people. They don't want to live here anymore. They don't feel safe here anymore. It's so traumatic to them that they need a completely different environment to immerse themselves in. And Senator Terlahi understood this, appreciated it, and came up with this whole law. So, in addition, current law provides that the board consists of 7 members, requiring a quorum of 4. This was back in the days when it was very hard for the parole board to meet because its members just weren't showing up for meetings. So they had to reduce the number to 5. So what this first reform measure that Senator Terlahi did was limit the number of times that those applying for parole can apply, and limits the number of members of the parole board. Now, there are amendments made to the parole board. Here are the minimum background and experience of each parole board member. Appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature. At least one board member shall have at least 5 years of experience in law enforcement or other criminal justice work, or a baccalaureate degree in criminal justice from a college or university accredited by a United States accrediting body recognized by the Council on Higher Education Accreditation or its successor, or an equivalent foreign university, blah, 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 blah. A second member, at least one board member shall have at least a baccalaureate degree or higher in social work, sociology, or psychology. At least one board member shall have at least 5 years of experience in human resources development or legal background or professional experience in these areas of study. At least 2 board members shall come from the public at large. All parole board members shall be of good moral character. I believe that Michelle Titano is one of those public at large members because she is definitely not a psychologist, sociologist, or social worker. She sure as bull don't have a criminal justice background. I highly doubt she has a law enforcement experience. The only thing she's ever enforced is her own ego. It says the board shall elect a chairperson from among its members. The chair shall be elected by its members every 2 years. The board shall meet regularly at least once a month. Not less than 3 voting members shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 3 members shall be required to take any action of the board. No action shall be taken by the board at any meetings or hearings unless a quorum is present. The election for chair from among its members shall follow upon enactment of this act. I don't see any provisions here about the removal of parole board members. I don't know if it's in another section of the law that just isn't showing here. If it's something that isn't defined, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the governor then has the authority to remove board members. Tell them to step down or whatever. Say, you gotta go, yo. So this is from Senator Therese Terlahi. Now let's throw up her quote. So we asked Senator Terlahi a bunch of questions about the current parole situation, the current MOFNA situation, and she responded. Do we have her quote up? We asked her what prompted your review of the Guam Parole Board. Then we told her Ariane Nepomuceno, Paul Mofnis's last known survivor prior to his arrest in the mid-90s, is livid with the government over Mofnis's release from prison. She's beyond upset that Michelle Titano suggested that fault rests with a 10-year-old girl walking to the bus stop at 6:30 a.m. She is calling for sweeping change in the justice system to ensure this never happens again, including the removal of the current board members. Is this something you will look into, removal of board members and reform of the parole process? And our last question is, may you give your message from the perspective of a mother and an elected official to the 10-year-old girl who was raped and to all survivors of child rape. And Senator Terlahi says, as a mother of 3 daughters, I share the justifiable anger of the women and men in our community at the high number of criminal sexual offenses and especially those against children on Guam. I am convinced that the incidences of repeat rapists warrants an urgent look by elected officials, the courts, and the entire criminal justice system at whether our current sentencing, imprisonment, rehabilitation, and release of sexual offenders is truly protecting our children and our community from repeat offenders. There are obviously gaps that need to be closed immediately to prevent further harm. We owe it to our children and to the survivors of these horrendous crimes to move heaven and earth to keep them safe. As a lawyer and in my capacity as chair of the Legislative Committee on Justice, I will begin with closing any gaps in our system that enable repeat offenders. We will ensure that laws that require victims to be heard and protected are enforced and that everyone is held accountable. We must immediately incorporate updated mental health, medical, and other tools to stop sexual crimes. Sincerely, Therese, she writes. This is a very powerful statement from a senator, something you don't really hear senators talk like this very often. You don't hear them make definitive statements, exclamatory statements like this. And the fact that Senator Therese Terlahi has made these statements says that this is her mission. This is something that she is totally committed to, and we at Kandit applaud her for that. Now, she isn't the only senator who has spoken up about this issue. We were able to speak with Senator Joe San Augustine, that same interview where we talked to him about the minimum wage. And he takes the same tone that Senator Therese Terlahi takes on this issue. So let's listen to his interview.
Even that, I mean, but that's what I'm saying, Troy, is that maybe the punishment should match the crime. You know what I mean? And how do you match it? Number one, if he's only was given 27 years, maybe that's what needs to be looked at. What is the punishment, and how severe should the punishment be? Because we've always got to take a look at 2 sides of the story, no matter what. Not saying the criminal and the victim. No. 2 sides is, should somebody have to serve for life for that crime? When it deals with minor, maybe they should. because I would really hope and pray it doesn't happen to one of mine, and I don't want to be a victim of that. My kids, my grandkids, or my soon to great grandkids, or anybody else's kids should not be a victim of that. And if we need to put them away for a longer term, then so be it. And then it shouldn't have been, if anything, it should be maybe 25 years. Then consider it for parole. Not, we're going to minus time served. What is this time served? Until you're convicted is when the time starts. If you're put in before you're convicted, well, you should have been there anyway to protect other victims. But then add it on from there. But maybe there wasn't enough years. He should have spent more. I hate to say that, but for every victim that's out there because of somebody that's let loose just a little bit too early, they just need to stay a little bit longer. Because there's nothing changing today. Some people are actually, they watch TV so much they think they're Superman, but the bad Superman, and then they do something wrong and then they think it's okay. No, it's, well, I was too young. Well, you need to serve time until you're too old to to commit another crime. And maybe that's what we need to look at, is we need to increase the time served. Not for time served, no. When you get convicted is when the time starts, not before.
Well, there seems to be a disparity in how the parole board doles these things out. So, for
but if we restrict who can qualify, the parole board won't have a choice.
Yeah.
Remember, the parole boards are common people, suppose, okay? Common people that sits there and says, well, you met this, you met this, you met this, you met this. If we add enough restriction on there, it'll be a long time before you meet this and this and this. And then at the same token, when somebody's going to be released on parole, they should put electronic monitoring. That's something that we're looking at in the budget for the courts. So that anybody's going to come out, there'll be a machine to watch where you're going and be able to monitor where you're at. And if you don't fulfill the requirements when you're released on parole, you go right back in immediately. There shouldn't have been a debate. If you're arrested for something, there shouldn't be an assumption of, was that innocent proven guilty? You're guilty to begin with because you're on parole. You shouldn't have been there. Kind of like, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Have a nice day. You're going back in and then just double the time and move on.
So the criminal pathology of someone like Paul Moffness, he's a sociopath with a lust for children. It doesn't change. Like, there's no rehabilitation.
Then he should lifetime
for people like that.
He should stay in prison for life. Send him off island. Let the people of Guam pay for it. Send him off island. We shouldn't have. We jeopardize the people of Guam. The Department of Correction is not a prison. It is a rehabilitation center. That's what it is. We should be focusing in rehabilitating our convicted constituents, in getting them ready to come out into the community, get back in the community. Everybody convicted there should be in a program to rehabilitate. When you're having crimes like that, have a nice day. You're going to federal pen. You ain't coming back to Guam. I don't know how that works, how you feel about that, but I believe the farther away they are from our people, the better off we'll be.
So there you have it. You have at least 2 members of the Guam legislature who have said something very definitive about their commitment to helping to solve this problem that we definitely have with the Guam Parole Board, where we have a parole board chair. First of all, paroling a monster like Paul Moffness, and we haven't even begun to look into the rest who've been paroled by Michelle Taitano, and also blaming, when confronted with accountability, with her responsibility in this whole matter, she turns and blames the 10-year-old girl, which creates a chilling effect in our society. And like Monique Baza said, and Ariane Nepomuceno also said in those comments on Facebook, these are the reasons why it's hard for victims and survivors to come forward, because of statements that come from the government, like Michelle Taitano's statements. However, with statements coming from our legislature, like Senator Therese Terlahi and from Senator Joseph Augustine, and also, to her credit, Senator Amanda Shelton, who after Senator Terlahi had already begun her inquiry, called for an inquiry into the matter. I guess Senator Shelton didn't know that. at the very least, 3 of the 15 senators have said something about this and have made definitive statements in support of Paul Mofnis's victims and survivors. Now, let's go to my screen. Chalu? What you're seeing is an aerial view of Paul Mofnis's neighborhood where he was living prior to his arrest last week, Saturday. This house right here, where the cursor is, close to where these 3 circles are, this is his address. Now, in the next, wait, oops. This is a ground view of the area, or a street view of the area of the house. And in a Facebook post, now what's important to note here is that we were able to grab several snapshots of Paul Mofnis's Facebook page and also his wife Perseveranda Mofnis's Facebook page before someone, and I'm not sure if it was Paul Mofnis, if he would have access to the internet while he's incarcerated at the detention facility. But somebody who has the credentials to these accounts, both his account and his wife's account, began to erase all of these images that we're about to show you. Here on that Facebook page is Paul Mofnis with a dead monitor lizard in his yard and a shovel. Now, the comments on that appear to be from his wife, but they're not. This is Paul Mofnis commenting from his wife's page. She says, "Yeah, heard some people will cook this beast. No, I've buried about 5 of these in the yard already. Fertilizer." And then he says to his sister, or to his sis, whoever that is, "Oh, he's already dead, sis. No worries." There were a series of drawings that, these drawings were the first to be taken down, by the way, as, no, Siri, I didn't fucking call you. Nothing, Siri. Oh, okay. There were a series of drawings that Paul Mofnis posted on his and his wife's Facebook pages, and they were the first things that went down. And they were disturbing drawings when you take a look at them. I sent these drawings to Dr. Ron McNinch from the University of Guam to help us understand his criminal pathology. Before I show you these other articles about that show possible victims, let's go to, Chelo, did I give you those pictures? Let's go to those drawings, one by one. Let me know when you stopped at the lots of different parrots and parakeets. So I didn't think anything about this particular one, but when I showed it to Dr. McNinch, he said, this is a cluster of birds, and the symbolism there is, Dr. McNinch believes that these might represent his victims, and his domination over those victims, and the passiveness of birds and their fragility. And he believes that Mr. Mofnis was reliving his conquests and did these drawings while he didn't have access to girls, so while he was in prison. And it's something that he needed to keep and needed to do in order to relive these fantasies of his. Now go to the lion, Chelu. This one is the most telling one, and then after the lion, just throw up Dr. McNinch's quote. So Dr. McNinch tells Kandit. Wait, let me bring it up. He says, I think it is a symbol of his victims. Take a look at how the lion or hen are hovering over, then see the clustered birds. I may be wrong, but he likely did this art when he didn't have access to children, so animals became the proxy. The artwork with the lion is very telling, he tells Kandit, dominating innocence. Also, the clustered birds is a dominating theme. We're raising this matter because, and we'll call Sergeant Paul Tapau in a second. We'll try to get a hold of him to see if he'll talk to us about what PNC broke a story about how sources have revealed to them that there are 2 victims and that Paul Mofnis is going to be charged with the abduction and rape of 2 more victims. But it had been 5 years from the time he was paroled to the time that he was arrested. And 5 years that followed 15 years in prison. This is a guy who has admitted that he can't stop. According to former Chief of Police Paul Suba, he's a guy who wanted to be caught because he didn't know how to stop himself from doing this. And according to former Chief of Police Paul Suba, they were afraid that he was going to escalate to killing people. Now, in the 5 years since he's been a freed man by that genius, Michelle Titano, Kandit looked through some of the stories that have popped up that kind of match Paul Mofnis's MO. Can we go back to my screen? Here's a story by Lacey Martinez in the Pacific Daily News about an attempted sexual assault where a man broke in and entered the room of a 12-year-old girl. June 26, 2016. A story by Maria Hernandez, June 30, 2015. Police seek suspects in kidnapping case. This one's an interesting one because there were 2 of them, but one of them was the real, like, one of them was the pro. You know, I'm not sure what the other one was. But the other one felt so bad that the victim was crying that he offered to take the girl back to the church where they had abducted her. She was 13, June 30, 2015. Then there's this one. A story by Gaynor Dumato Delano in the PDN on November 14, 2014. This was 10 months after Paul Mofnis' release from prison in February 2014. The skeleton of a young woman found in Dededo at a drainage pond. There is no indication that residents are anxious about the discovery of a dead person, the story reads, because there has been no confirmation from police of any foul play in the death. Dededo Mayor Milis Svarez said she isn't aware of reported missing women in Dededo. She added there may have been wanderers who end up in the village. Jeez. And there's this. A home invasion on July 13, 2017. The girl described the man as 30 to 40 years old with a medium to fair complexion who was about 5 feet 5 inches or 5 feet 6 inches tall and wearing dark clothing and a black baseball cap standing at the entrance of her room. Now, let's go back to the camera. There's something very interesting that Ariane Nepomuceno said in her interview with Kandit News. And if there is nothing else that you pay attention to in this live cast tonight, let it be this. She said that after Paul Mofnis dropped her to school, after he raped her in 1995, unknown to her at the time until later, her mom received a phone call from Paul Mofnis, and he told the mother, "Your daughter has nice breasts." And then a few minutes later, Ariane Nepomuceno's mother received a phone call that something had happened to her daughter. Paul Mofnis was taunting Ariane Nepomuceno's mother, taunting her family. Now, Kandit has not been able to find out whether this same taunting happened with the other 3 known survivors. We don't know whether it happened either through a phone call or an email or some kind of communication, Facebook Messenger, a Facebook comment, or something from a fake profile with the 10-year-old girl to any of her family members. But if this is part of his MO, if it's part of his MO, then all of you who have daughters who fit this age bracket over the last 5 years, friends who fit this age bracket over the last 5 years, who maybe these women, these girls, never said anything about being raped, about being abducted. Maybe they have been in complete silence. If you've noticed some kind of major change in their behavior, and if you can recall ever receiving a phone call or a message that was just so totally off and perverted, sick, just out of the blue about that girl, you need to do something. You need to say something. And if you find out that, yes, this girl was victimized, first you need to provide that girl with all the support that she needs. And you guys need to break your silence and come forward about this, because we highly doubt that Paul Mofnis only has had 3 victims this entire time. He has a compulsion. He cannot help himself. This is very important. If this is part of his MO, then and there are more victims, then more people receive these taunting messages. And you may be the key to finding out whether someone you love has been victimized by Paul Mofnis. And this is just Paul Mofnis. This doesn't even, we're not even broaching the subject of other predators who exist in our community. Because Paul Mofnis isn't the only one. He just happens to be one of the bigger cases because of how reprehensible his conduct has been, how monstrous his behavior is. Well, the monster that he is. Here's something else that's interesting that we found. On Mr. Mofnis's Facebook page, this is a picture of Paul Mofnis. Are we on my my screen? This is a picture of Paul Mofnis right here. Right? This is a picture of his wife, Perseveranda. And, oh shoot, what did I just do? And then we wondered who this woman is. And we found out her name is Rhonda Pangadinen, I think. I'm probably pronouncing her last name wrong. And we wondered, well, who is she to Paul Mofnis or to Perseveranda Mofnis, his wife? Well, she's Paul Mofnis's relative. She is a Mofnis, either the sister or the cousin. And remember, I'm sorry, this is not from Facebook. This is from his WhatsApp profile pic. We were able to dig out his phone number go to his phone number, and this is what appears as his WhatsApp profile pic. So we went to Rhonda's page and we found this. Uncle Juan and me, Christmas Eve. This man right here, so this is Rhonda. This man right here is John Moffness, who was a very big part of the former administration's team in many different ways. And just remember, the date of Paul Moffness's parole was February 27, 2014. What happened in 2014? Well, there was a big ass election in 2014, and this was around the time where I know for a fact that Frank Areola, the governor's former chief of staff, the former governor's chief of staff, Rose Ramsey, the former governor's deputy chief of staff, and John Moffness, the guy in this picture. Are we back on camera? Sure. Had a policy of doing anything and everything to secure votes. And the fact that this man, John Moffness, is a close relative of this monster, Paul Moffness, and that his parole happened as soon as it could happen at the height of the re-election effort of the previous governor, leaves many questions that need to be answered by people like Frank Areola, Rose Ramsey, and John Moffness. Because I know for a fact that all these decisions that happened at Adelup over this, especially over this period of time, had to be cleared at Adelup. There had to be clearance at the governor's office, at the front office, by, at the very least, Rose Ramsey or Frank Areola, in order for Michelle Taitano to have gone ahead with the parole of Paul Moffness. And I just have a hard time believing that it is just a mere coincidence that this man is closely related to John Moffness, a big part of the former administration. So we're gonna follow this story even more to find out what in the world happened and how could they allow a monster out of prison like that. That's all that we have for tonight. If you have any questions or comments, just feel free to message it to us. Call us at 922-6397 or 979-6397. But for now, this is a wrap for us, and we're going to go home because we're tired. A blessed Good Friday to you all. A blessed Holy Saturday that's upcoming, and Happy Easter to you and to yours in a celebration of renewal and life, and the Lord's blessings, will, the sacrifice that he made for all of us so that we may be born into the light of the Lord. Have a great night.